Hello everyone. I don't know why, but while I was recording the video for this chapter, the video recording stopped in half, okay, towards the end basically. So I'm re-recording this uh, later half of the chapter from where the first video was left off. So you can watch that video first and then watch this video to complete the lecture. Okay, so this chapter will be divided into two videos. So this is basically the towards the end of the chapter, and here in this part of the chapter we discuss different APIs that the file system provides to the user programs, through which APIs, by calling those APIs or interfaces or those functions, the user programs can manipulate data on the hard disk. Okay, so in the previous half of the chapter, we basically discussed different data structures that the OS uses to keep information on a hard disk, whether it is file content in terms of user data or whether it is meta information about different files or directories that the operating system is storing to do bookkeeping or maintain the hierarchical structure of the files and directories on the hard disk. Okay, so we studied those data structures, and here in this part of the chapter we will discuss this interface or API provided by the file system, through which we can manipulate those data structures and the data stored on the hard disk. Okay, so we can open files, read and write data from and to files. We can create new files, delete new files, and same for directories. Okay, so API basically permits us to do all these things, and we'll see for each function call what steps are happening in the background using those data structures on the hard disk. Okay, so first of all, let's take this call to open. Okay, so we know in C and C++, whenever we want to manipulate a file, read or write data from or to that file, we have to first open that file. Okay, so open file basically, open function takes a path to the file on the hard disk and a mode in which to open that file. Okay, so here we are asking the file system to open this file /foo/bar in a read-only mode. Okay, so this path basically represents or tells us information about the location of that file on the hard disk in terms of the hierarchy, file system hierarchy, where is this file located. Okay, so as you guys know by now that Linux file system is organized in a tree-like hierarchy, where you have different nodes of those trees are directories, intermediate nodes, and the leaves of that tree can be a directory or a file. Okay, so the topmost directory or the root of that tree is a special directory which is called root directory, and it is represented by this /. Okay, so the first / in a file path basically represents the root directory, and other / in the path are basically separators. Okay, so here this path basically tells us that we want to open this file called bar, which is located inside a directory called foo, and that directory itself is located inside the root directory. Okay, so if we issue this call to open this file, what steps will this function take, or what steps will the file system take to get us or open this file for us? Okay, so opening a file basically means getting the inode of this file and reading information from the inode of this file. Okay, so first of all, this path tells us the logical place or location of this file in the file system hierarchy. Okay, it does not tell us the physical location where the inode for this file is stored. Okay, so how do we find the physical location where the inode for this file is stored on the hard disk? Okay, so we do this by traversing this path and reading the inode of every directory that we find on this path. Okay, so we start by first reading information about the root directory, this / first /. Okay, so we read the information from the inode of the first root directory. So for that we need the root's inode number. Okay, so when the operating system mounts a file system, it reads information from the super block. Okay, So superblock contains information about the starting address of the inode table. Okay, and usually the root directory is located, or the inode for the root directory is the first inode in that table. Okay, so if from a superblock the operating system reads the address of the start of the inode table, it also gets the address for the inode of the root directory because it is located at the very start of the inode table. So getting using that address, the file system will go ahead and read the inode for the root directory. Okay, so it will read in all the information in the inode of the root directory, and this information will also include information about the data blocks associated with that root directory. Okay, so remember the data block associated with the root directory will contain the contents of the that directory, or in this case root directory. Okay, so what do the contents of a directory look like? We have already seen that the contents of a directory look like this. They are composed of directory entries, and each directory entry basically tells you which file or directory is contained inside this particular directory in that file system hierarchy. Okay, so it contains the name of file or directory inside this directory, as well as their inode numbers and some other information. Okay, so we basically get the data block for the root directory, and in that data block we will have the contents of the root directory in terms of directory entries, and in those directory entries we will search for a directory entry for this directory foo, which is contained inside the root directory. Okay, so we search this directory entries, and ultimately we will find a directory entry whose name is foo. Okay, so once we have found this directory entry with the name with whose name foo matches the foo in our path, we will basically get the inode number for this foo directory. Okay, so this entry will contain the inode number for the foo directory. So once we have the inode number for foo directory, we will go at the in the inode table at this index inode number 12 and read the inode for foo directory. Okay, so here after getting the inode number for foo directory, we will go in the inode table and read the inode for foo directory. Okay, so once we have the inode for foo directory, we read its information, and from that we get the pointer to the data block of foo directory, which will contain the contents of the foo directory. Again, foo directory will again contain directory entries. So in those directory entries, we will search for an entry whose name is bar. Okay, so once we find that entry by matching the name bar, we will basically from that entry get the inode for this file bar. Okay, so once we have the inode for this file bar, we will again go into the inode table and read the inode at that index to read the inode of the bar file. Okay, so once we have read the information from the inode of the bar file, this open function will complete, and internally the file system will associate a file descriptor to this inode /foo of bar file and return that file descriptor from this open function. Okay, so this is the process through which the operating system will go and locate the inode for the bar file at its physical location on the hard disk. So once the file has been opened, and since this file was opened in a read-only mode, we can call read function to read data from that file. Okay, so read function usually take the file descriptor and a buffer in which we will copy the data by reading it from the hard disk into RAM and copy into that buffer, and size of data, how much data we need to read from the file. Okay, so since the file is already open, we have the information contained in that file's inode block. Okay, so that file's inode block will inode will contain information about the data blocks which are used to, or pointers to data block which are used to store the user content of this particular file. Okay, so once we have all the addresses of the data blocks which are containing the contents of this file, if we want to locate or read data from a certain offset in that file, we will first have to calculate that this particular offset will lie in which data block associated with this file. Okay, so based on block size and that offset calculation, we'll calculate the block number in which that offset will lie, and using that inode, we'll get the pointer for that block, and once we have that block pointer, we can go ahead and read data from that block and copy it into the buffer that has been provided to this read block, read function. Okay. So this basically is the process in which, after locating the correct data block, the file system will read data from the hard disk and copy it into RAM for that in that particular buffer. Okay. So internally, the operating system is keeping track of each open file, that until which location we have read data from that file. Okay, so that when we call read the next time, we don't have to specify the offset. It will automatically start reading from the location until which it had read in the last read. Okay, so next call to read will read from after the first read. Okay, so this internally it is keeping a pointer to within each file to keep track of how much or until which location it has already read from that file. So this pointer we can call it a seek offset. Okay. So by default, it starts reading from the first read will start reading from first block. Okay, but we can move or set this offset to change and read from a particular block. Okay. So repeated calls to read will similarly basically keep on reading from the particular block that we are requesting, which contains the offset. A close function call, which is complementary to open, will basically release the file descriptor or deallocate the file descriptor which had been assigned to this open file. So here basically we have a pictorial view, a pictorial representation of how open and read function calls will basically be implemented in low-level file system operations. Okay, so here we have different parts of the hard disk, and for each function call we are basically told or shown which parts of the hard disk will be accessed to implement that particular function call. For example, the open function call, where we open /foo/bar file, will first access the inode table. So this is the inode table. These are the inode and data bitmaps, which can store a record of which of the inodes are free and which are occupied. Same for data blocks. So this is the inode table, which contains the inodes for different files, and this is the data region, which contains data blocks for different files. So open function call will first read the root inode in the inode table. Okay, and once it has extracted data from root inode, it will go ahead and read the data block associated with the root directory. Okay, this data block will contain the contents of the root directory in the form of directory entries. So here it will find the entry for foo and extract the inode number for foo directory. Okay. Once it has the inode number for a directory foo, it will go ahead and index at that inode in inode table to read the inode for the foo directory. Okay. So again, it will read information from the foo directory, including the addresses of its data blocks, and it will go ahead and then read the data block associated with the foo directory, which will contain the contents of the foo directory in the form of directory entries, and in those directory entries it will search for an entry for the name of bar. Okay. Once it has found the entry bar, it will extract the inode number for the bar file from that entry, and using that inode number it will go and index into the inode table to read the inode for the bar file. Okay, so after reading this information, this open function will complete and it will return. Okay, so this shows what different portions of the hard disk are accessed during an open function. Similarly, when we call read on an already open file, it will basically using that, if you specified a certain offset, it will calculate the proper block number, and using the information stored in inode of that file, it will get the address of that block from the inode, and then it will go on that address and read the data from the appropriate block. And after reading the data, it will basically modify the inode to change the last access time for this file in the inode, okay, and then update the inode for this file. Again, repeatedly calling, read will follow the same flow, and every time the read, if we don't change the seek offset, the next read will basically happen after the first read. It will read data from the location after the first read. Okay, so this is a pictorial view of which portions of the hard disk will be accessed when we call open and read functions. Next, there are write functions. So once a file has been opened, we basically can call, if the file has been opened in the write mode, then we can call write function on that file. Okay. So the write function basically is the same as the starting part of the write function is similar to read function, in that we need to calculate the data block in which we want to write, and for that we need to extract information from the inode of that file. We will extract the proper address of that data block, and then we will go and write to that data block. But in write, it may happen that we have already reached the end of the that file, and if we want to write new data beyond the end of that file, we might need an additional data block, okay, because the previous data block might have reached its end. Okay. So for that we need to allot an extra data block to this file, and for that we need to find a new free data block. Okay, so how do we find a free data block? We go and read the data bitmap. Remember, data bitmap contains bits which tell us which block is occupied and which block is free. So out of this free blocks, we will select one block and allocate this block to the this file. Okay. So using this bitmap, we select a free block, and once we have selected a free block, we will basically update this bitmap to mark this block which was free until now as occupied now. Okay, so we'll update the data bitmap, and then we will basically read the bar inode and update it with the address of this new block. Okay, so we'll basically store the address of this new block in the as a direct pointer inside the inode of this file. So this way, this block has now been attached to this file, and once that has been done, we will go ahead and write our data, the data that we are wanting to add to this file in this new data block. And once we have written our data, then we will update the inode for this file to change the last access time and last modified time, and write this new information in the inode of this file. Okay, so this will complete our write function. And if you wanted to create a new file, then again, as we'll have to modify some content on the hard disk, and as we know, every file has to have an inode associated with it. And if we are going to create a new file, then we'll have to create or attach a new inode to this file. Okay, so how do you find a new inode? Basically, we'll go in the inode table, go to the inode bitmap and see which of these inodes are free. Okay, so out of these free inodes, we will select one inode, okay, and associate this inode with this file that we are going to create it. Okay, so this inode which was free until now, we will update the bitmap and mark this inode as occupied now, because we have chosen it for our file, and update this inode bitmap. Okay, now we will fill all the information about this file in this inode, and since this file that we are going to create now, this will be created inside a directory, so a directory entry will have to be made of this newly added file in the parent directory. Okay, so we will go ahead and read the data block of the parent directory, okay, because that data block will contain entries of the parent directory, and in that we will add a new entry for this particular file. So we'll update the data block of the parent directory with an entry for this file, in which we will write the name of this file and the inode and the number of the inode that we have chosen for this file. Okay, so this way this file will now become a part of the parent directory. Okay. So then we will basically update the inode of the parent directory, because now the content of the parent directory have been modified. So we will update the inode of the parent directory to change the last modified and last access time. Okay. So this will basically create a new file inside the parent directory and have an inode associated with it. Okay. And similarly, if the data block for that parent directory was full, then we will add another data block to the inode of the parent directory and create this the entry for this file in the newly added block. So this again is a pictorial view of which portion of the hard disk will be touched when we create a new file or when we write to an existing open file. Okay, so creation, as you can see, we basically create this file at a certain location in the hard disk file system hierarchy inside the parent file. So we start with reading the inode for the root directory, read the contents of the root directory from the data block, find this entry for foo, extract the inode for foo, go ahead using that inode number, go ahead and read the inode for foo. From the inode for foo, we will get the data block for foo, which will contain the contents of the foo. So inside that data block or inside the data block for parent directory foo, we will have to create this entry for bar. Okay. So before we create the entry for bar, we will first have to choose a new inode for this bar file. Okay. So in the inode bitmap, we find a free inode. We basically update the inode bitmap to mark this inode as occupied, and we will create entry for this bar file in the parent directory by creating an entry for this bar file in the data block of the parent directory. Okay, so in that entry we will write the name of the file bar and the inode number that we have associated with this file bar that we have chosen for this file bar. Okay, so this will complete the creation of this file inside the parent directory. Okay, so now that it has been created, we will basically fill in the information of this file bar inside the inode that we have chosen for this file. Okay, so we will basically write all the information, creation information, size, owner, etc. in the inode, the metadata in the inode of the bar, and update the inode in the inode table. And now, since the content of the parent directory have been modified, we will also update the content of the inode of the parent directory by changing its last modified and last access time. Okay. So this is the flow of what will happen in the background and which portion of the hard disk will be touched if we create a new file. Okay. Similarly, when we write data into a file, usually we write at the end of the file. Okay, so for that again we will read the inode of that file. We will basically extract the part of the inode where there are pointers, direct pointers to the data blocks, and if we are trying to write at the end of the last data block, we will have to allocate a new data block. Okay, so how do we allocate a new data block? We go read the data bitmap, find a free data block in that data bitmap, mark that free block as occupied now, because now we have chosen this data block for our file, so it is no longer free. Okay, so we update the data bitmap with this information, and then we go ahead and write our information in that data block that we have chosen, and then we basically attach this data block to our file by writing its address in the inode of our file. Okay, so now this data block has been attached to our file, and we'll also update the inode with last modified time and last access time. Okay, so this completes the write operation, and subsequent calls to write will follow the same operation, and they will basically write after until the last write was written. Okay, so this is a pictorial view of how system calls to create a file and write to a file will take different steps in the background and which parts of the hard disk will be touched during all these steps. Okay, so you can see that a system call can generate many IOs to different parts of the hard disk. Okay, so especially if the path is long. Okay, so since we access all these inodes for intermediate directories, so on a long path, an operating system or file system will do a lot of IOs to the hard disk, and since IOs to hard disk is slow, so we will try, our maximum try will be to avoid as many IOs as possible. Okay? So for that, to avoid lots of IOs to hard disk, we will basically cache the inode and other information about frequently used directories in RAM. Okay, so that information is always in RAM, and whenever we want to access that information, instead of doing an IO to the hard disk, we access this information from the RAM. Okay, so we will basically dedicate part of the RAM to work as cache for the hard disk, and we will store information about frequently accessed files and directories in that part of RAM. This will avoid us frequent trips to RAM to the hard disk. Okay, and save us time. So for this, there can be two schemes. Either we can dedicate a fixed portion of RAM as cache for the hard disk, or we can use a dynamic caching scheme in which the portion of RAM that is acting as a cache for hard disk, its size can be dynamically adjusted, can be reduced or increased based on our requirements. Okay, so both schemes are employed. Another scheme that is employed to avoid frequent trips to hard disk is write buffering. Okay, so whenever a write request is issued from a user program, instead of the file system immediately sending this write request to the hard disk, it first buffers this request in RAM. Okay, so this way it tries to buffer a certain amount of requests, and only after a certain amount has been buffered, only then it will send all these requests together in the form of a batch to the hard disk. Okay, so this has two advantages. First of all, when hard disk receives a batch of requests, a set of requests, so a hard disk, since we have seen in the last chapter, has more information about the data layout, so it can rearrange, it has margin to rearrange these requests for an efficient implementation or for an efficient working of the hard disk. Okay? This is one advantage of buffering writes. The second advantage is sometimes there are unnecessary writes which get avoided. Okay, so let's say a user program issues a write to sector number 6. Okay, so the operating system buffers this request, and then the user program writes to sector number 6 again, overwriting the old data. Okay, so again this request is written in the cache and not in the hard disk. Let's say that user program writes to sector number 6 again. Okay, so again that second data is also overwritten. Okay? So when these writes are cached and they are written to the hard disk, the operating system will detect that all these writes have been to the same sector. So instead of sending all these write requests to the hard disk, it will only send the last write request, because the last write has overwritten all the previous writes. Okay, so all the previous writes, they were ultimately overwritten, so they were unnecessary and we did not need to send them to the hard disk. Okay, so this way the operating system can get an opportunity to avoid unnecessary writes and only send the latest write to the hard disk. Okay, so this is applicable only in some cases, but still it is useful to avoid unnecessary writes to the hard disk. So we can buffer different writes before sending them to the hard disk, but the question is for how long we should buffer. Shall we buffer for a certain amount of time, let's say 15-30 seconds, or shall we buffer for a certain amount of write requests, let's say a dozen write requests have to be available before we want to send it to the hard disk. Okay? So both schemes are not a universal solution, and there are trade-offs, because sometimes we might be sending too early and sometimes we might be sending writes to the hard disk too late. Okay, so there are different trade-offs in each case, and I will let you brainstorm and think about what can be the different advantages and disadvantages of each scheme. So this basically ends this chapter of file system implementation, and we have seen how a simple file system can be implemented on a small hard disk. Okay, so although this was a very simple file system, but at least it gave you an idea of how files and directories are arranged on the hard disk, how data is laid out on the hard disk, how hard disk is divided into different portions, and what kind of data structures do we use to store different kind of information about files and directories on the hard disk, and what kind of different API the file system provides, and when we call those API function, what kind of action happen in the background to implement those API functions by manipulating data on the hard disk. Okay, so hope this was useful for you guys, and if you guys please go ahead and read this chapter, and if you have any questions, you can ask them in the interactive session. Okay, so thank you very much, and I will stop this recording now.